The trip was Priscilla's idea, not mine. She'd been talking about doing a cross-country drive since we were in college together back in Knoxville, always going on about wanting to see the actual country instead of just flying over it. I agreed because I had nothing going on that summer. My lease was up in June. My boyfriend had moved to Portland without asking me to come with him. And a road trip seemed like at least something to do with my hands instead of sitting in an empty apartment refreshing job listings. We left Las Vegas on a Thursday morning, early enough that the strip was still kind of quiet. Pointed the car north on US 93. I should say something about the car because it matters later. It was Priscilla's 2017 Honda Civic. Dark gray, nothing special, but she'd had it serviced 2 weeks before we left, so the oil was fresh, tires rotated, everything checked out. She was like that about her car, careful in a way I never was with mine. She'd even filled the tank before we picked up breakfast. So when we got on the road, we had a full tank, just under 13 gallons. The drive out of Vegas is fine for maybe 40 minutes. There's still civilization for a while. A Walmart distribution center off the highway, some outlet stores. The kind of flat suburban sprawl that looks the same in every American state. Then it just stops, and you're in the desert. 1 minute there are buildings, and the next minute there aren't. And the road stretches out ahead of you so far that you can already see heat rising off it at 8 in the morning. Priscilla had a playlist going, something folky and low-key, and we were talking about normal things, whether she was going to take that job offer in Denver, whether I should text my ex back, or just block him. The kind of conversation you have when you're driving somewhere and you're relaxed, nowhere to be until whenever you feel like stopping. We weren't rushing, the plan was vague on purpose. Drive north, maybe stop in Ely for the night, see what came after that. About 90 miles north of Vegas, we passed a gas station on the right side of the highway. It was a small one, 2 pumps under a metal canopy, a low concrete building behind it, painted white with a faded Sinclair logo on the side. There was one other car there, a green Jeep parked off to the side, but nobody visible near it. The lights inside the station were on, the sign above the pumps lit. About 10 minutes further, a phone booth, not even on a pullout, just standing at the edge of the asphalt, one of those old aluminum and glass ones they used to have everywhere, the kind you only see in old photographs now. The glass panels were mostly intact. I remember thinking it was strange that it was just out there in the middle of nothing, with no building near it, no reason for it. But Priscilla was mid-sentence about her Denver situation, so I let it go. 20 minutes after that, a motel. It was called the High Desert Inn, a sign in blue and orange on a post out front. 1-story building, maybe 12 or 14 units, and a gravel parking lot. A neon vacancy sign glowed steady red in the office window. The American flag out front moved a little in whatever wind was out there. We went past it at 65 and kept going. We should stop somewhere for lunch before Ely, Priscilla said, looking at her phone's map. And I agreed. That was around mile marker 112, though I wasn't tracking the markers carefully at that point. The next hour was unremarkable. The desert does this thing where it hypnotizes you if you let it. The same colors repeating, tan and rust and gray, the occasional Joshua tree or scrub brush. The road endlessly ahead. I'd switched to the passenger seat at the last stop before Vegas, so I was looking out the window mostly, drifting into that half-awake road trip state where you're not really thinking, just existing. Then Priscilla said, "Didn't we already pass that?" I looked up. On the right side of the highway, a small gas station, 2 pumps under a metal canopy, the Sinclair logo faded on the white concrete building. A green Jeep parked off to the side. "Must be a similar one," I said, because that was the logical thing to say, and Priscilla made a small sound that wasn't agreement or disagreement and kept driving. 12 minutes later, the phone booth. I know it was 12 minutes because I just looked at the clock when Priscilla said she was getting kind of hungry. The booth was on the left side this time, the glass catching the sun at a different angle, but the shape was identical. The aluminum frame, the same proportions, the same slight lean to the left, like it'd been standing in the heat long enough to start settling. I turned and watched it through the rear window until we went around a long curve and it disappeared. I didn't say anything because I didn't know what to say, and Priscilla didn't mention it either. 18 minutes after that, The High Desert Inn, blue and orange sign, 1 story, gravel lot, 12 or 14 units. The vacancy sign in the office window glowing steady red. That's the motel we passed, I said. She slowed down a little, not much, maybe from 65 to 55, looking at it as we went by. Then she sped back up. Roads out here all look the same, she said, which is the kind of thing you say when you want something to be normal. We kept driving. The sign was an ordinary green highway sign, the kind that tells you upcoming services or distances. On the right side, just after a slight rise in the road. I noticed it because we'd been watching for something about Ely. It said, low fuel, next services 61 miles. I looked at the gas gauge. We had just under a quarter tank. We should stop at the next station, I said, without mentioning the sign, because it seemed like a coincidence, one of those moments where something lines up and feels strange but probably has a normal explanation. Priscilla said the same thing I was thinking, that we must have been driving longer than it felt. The desert does that to you. She said she thought we had more gas than that, but she wasn't going to argue with the gauge. The road kept going. There was nothing on either side, just heat-blurred distance, tan scrub brush, and the white dashes in the center line coming at us one after another. I put some music on because the silence had started to feel different, not peaceful the way it was before. More like the kind of quiet that sits in a room after something has happened in it. Another sign appeared, maybe 4 miles after the first. Your right rear tire will fail in 1 mile. Priscilla said what? Out loud, looking at the sign in the rear view as we passed it, and I turned to look back at it too. And it said exactly what I'd read. I told her maybe it was a digital variable message board, but even as I said it, I knew that wasn't right, because the sign was standard green aluminum, the letters white reflective, the kind they put up and leave for years. 1 mile later, the right rear tire blew. A full blowout, the car pulling hard to the right, Priscilla gripping the wheel with both hands, getting it stopped on the gravel shoulder without spinning out, which took maybe 6 or 7 seconds and felt much longer. We sat there after she got it stopped. The engine was still running. The hazards were clicking. She got out first, and I followed. The right rear tire was flat, in the specific way blowouts go flat. The sidewall split, the rubber almost shredded in one section. She stood looking at it, not saying anything for a moment, then said it was fine. She had a spare. She always carried a spare. While she got the jack out, I walked back up the shoulder, just far enough to look for the sign. I could see it from there, in the distance, the letters catching the sun. I went back and helped change the tire. The spare was one of those small donut types not built for distance, and Priscilla said we needed to stop at the next gas station, get some air in the full size, swap them back or buy a new one if they had it. We got back in and drove slowly, maybe 45 miles an hour because of the donut. The fuel light came on 8 minutes later. Then we saw the gas station. Same canopy, same white building, same Sinclair sign, and the same green Jeep on the side. We pulled in. There was no one there. The Jeep was empty, like it hasn't been touched in a long time, a thin layer of dust on the dash, visible through the window. The office door was unlocked. I pushed it open and called out. The bell above the door rang. There were chips on a rack and drinks in a refrigerator case, and the refrigerator light was buzzing. A small TV on the counter was on, playing what looked like a fishing show, a man on a lake holding up a bass, the volume very low. Nobody answered. Priscilla found that the pumps were active, the screens lit, and when she lifted the nozzle on pump 1, it started flowing without asking for payment, which we thought was odd. But the gauge was on empty, so she filled the tank while I went into the office and looked around for whoever ran the place. There was a mug of coffee on the counter, still warm when I touched the side of it, a set of keys on a hook behind the register, a logbook open to a page with some entries, the last one dated that morning, handwriting in blue ink. Just a time, just 7:14 a.m. No name, and no other notes. I walked around the counter and looked through the doorway into the back. A stock room, some boxes of motor oil and wiper fluid, a folding chair with a jacket draped over it. A door at the back of the stock room was open maybe 3 inches, and beyond it I could see what looked like a bathroom. the edge of a sink, and the light on in there. I said hello again. My voice didn't go anywhere. It just died 2 feet in front of me. I went back outside. Priscilla had finished fueling and had the full-size tire back on, the donut in the trunk, and she'd found an air compressor on the side of the building and gotten the pressure right. She hadn't seen anyone either. We stood next to the car for a minute, looking at the office, looking at the road in both directions, which was empty as far as either way could see. "We should leave money," I said. And she said yeah, she'd left $40 on the counter, which felt right. We got back on the road. The motel was 9 miles up a highway. We pulled in because Priscilla said she needed a real bathroom because the driving was getting to both of us in a way we weren't fully acknowledging. The rocky lot crunched under the tires. The vacancy sign was still on in the office, still that steady red, not the flickering kind, just solid. The office door was open, not just unlocked, but standing open, held back by a rubber doorstop wedged under it. The desk inside had a push bell on it, and Priscilla pressed it twice while I looked at the room behind the desk. There were cubbies on the wall for each room number, some with keys, a rack of tourist brochures for places in the region, a corkboard with papers pinned to it. No one came to greet us. I went to look at the corkboard while Priscilla called out toward the back. The papers were printed photographs, black and white, maybe 4 by 6 inches, pinned in rows. I looked at the first one for a second before I understood what I was seeing, because the image quality wasn't good and the scale was confusing at first. Then I understood, and took a step back. They were photographs of people. Several photographs of people in what I can only describe as bad situations. Not gore in the slaughterhouse sense. It was more precise than that. More careful in a way I still don't have the right word for. The kind of careful that makes it worse. The people in the photographs were clearly conscious, clearly aware of the camera, and in some of them they were looking directly into it. I pulled Priscilla out of the office. She asked what was wrong, and I said we needed to go. She started to protest, but I didn't wait. I just walked back to the car, and she followed, and when she got in and I told her what I'd seen, she went very quiet. She didn't say I was overreacting. She didn't say anything at all for a while. We just drove. The fuel gauge was at 3/4, which made no sense with how much driving we'd done, but neither of us brought it up. The miles went by. The desert didn't change. I'd been trying to track our progress on my phone, but the Maps app kept spinning. No signal. No GPS lock, which happens out in the Nevada desert but had been going on for longer than made sense. Then the phone booth again. It was on the right side. We were passing it at about 60 when it started ringing, the old bell kind, the one you only hear in old movies, that double ring pattern. On and on as we drove by. I turned and watched it through the rear window, the glass catching the afternoon light. "Stop," I said. Priscilla said, "Are you serious?" I said, "Stop the car." She pulled over onto the shoulder about 200 feet past the booth, and we sat there with the engine running. The ringing was faint now, but still audible through the closed windows. I can't explain why I wanted to answer it. Just a very strong feeling that I needed to. I got out, walked back to the booth. Priscilla stayed in the car watching me in the side view mirror. I picked up the handset. It smelled like old metal. The ringing stopped the instant I lifted the receiver. There was 1 second of genuine silence, not even the ambient hiss you get on phone calls. Then the sound started. It was people. Multiple people. Voices overlapping, some crying, some saying words I couldn't make out at first, and then gradually could. "Help me. Please. Is anyone there?" The kinds of things you say when you're in real trouble and reaching for someone to come. Not performing distress, actually in it, which sounds different, and I recognized the difference immediately. The quality of it was like listening through a wall into another room, being adjacent to something without being part of it. None of them were talking to me. That was the thing I kept coming back to afterward. They weren't responding to anything I said, not reacting to my voice at all. They were just in there calling out, and I was just listening, the way you sometimes listen to something not meant for you. I stood there maybe 30 seconds, then put the receiver back on the hook and walked back to the car. Priscilla asked what it was. I said it was just noise, because I didn't know how to say what it actually was. which was exactly what it was. We got back on the road. The next sign we saw said, "Storm ahead, do not proceed." Not the orange diamond warning style, not a construction board, just a standard green informational sign with white text. We slowed down and looked at it, then looked at the sky ahead, which was clear, the usual desert blue, not a cloud anywhere in any direction. "That's not a real sign," Priscilla said. "None of the signs have been real signs," I said. She didn't respond to that. We passed the same gas station again. The tank was sitting at half, which was also wrong since we'd filled it an hour and a half ago and hadn't put 200 miles on it. We passed the phone booth, which was silent this time. We passed the same motel. Priscilla asked how long we'd been driving, and I looked at the clock, which said 4:47, meaning it had been around 8 hours since we left Vegas. Except that felt wrong. It felt like half of that at most. I told her what it said. She looked at her own watch, which agreed, and she went quiet. The sky started changing about 20 minutes after that. It was like a line, a visible edge in the sky maybe 10 miles ahead, blue on our side. On the other side, something brown and textured. A wall of it, a dust storm like a tidal wave rolling across the flats. It was moving faster than I thought something that size could move. Faster than anything I'd seen in videos of the same thing. Priscilla said maybe we should turn around, and we tried. But the shoulder was narrow there, she had to do a 3-point turn, and by the time she'd finished and we were pointing south, the road behind us looked the same as the road ahead. The storm was in that direction too now, the same brown wall, the same visible edge maybe 10 miles back. We sat in the middle of the road for a few seconds, turning our heads from one direction to the other. Then she turned north again, toward the original storm, and drove. It hit us about 4 minutes later. The light went from full afternoon sun to near dark in maybe 30 seconds, a specific brown-orange darkness that pressed against the windows. The car rocked. Priscilla dropped to 30, then 20, gripping the wheel with both hands, leaning forward like getting closer to the windshield would help her see. The dust was thick enough that the headlights just lit up a wall of particles, so she turned them off because they were making it worse. I had my hands against the dashboard. I don't remember putting them there. At 5 miles an hour, we could just barely see the edge of the road. The sound was continuous, a roar hiss of particles hitting the metal of the car, hitting the glass. The car kept rocking. Priscilla was talking, saying something low. And when I focused, I realized she was saying the same phrase over and over, just telling herself to stay on the road. Then she said, "There's something on the road." I looked up from the dashboard into the wall of brown outside the windshield, and for 1 second, where the dust thinned or shifted, I saw it too. Standing in the middle of the lane, the proportions were wrong for any animal I know. Too tall and too thin, the silhouette of it barely visible through the dust. Then the dust closed back in. Priscilla screamed, and I felt the impact. Not a crunch or a bang, more of a shudder through the whole frame of the car, through my seat and into my spine. Then the car was tilting, the horizon going wrong through the windows. And for a moment I was looking at the road surface sideways through Priscilla's window, before the ground came up through the metal into everything and the world went the color behind your eyelids when you press on them. Nothing after that. The cleanest nothing I've ever felt, with no sense of time passing at all. I woke up on the ceiling. That was my first thought, that I was on the ceiling. But it was the car's roof. The car had gone onto its roof. I was hanging sideways in the seatbelt. The dust was still going outside. I could hear it. Priscilla was already moving, saying something about getting out, and her voice was strange, like hearing someone through water. Getting out of an upside-down car is something I'd never thought about how to do before that moment. The window on my side wouldn't open, but the glass had spiderwebbed, and I got it out in one piece by pushing. Laid it on the road, climbed through onto the pavement. The asphalt under my palms was hot even through the storm. I crawled around to Priscilla's side, pulled her door open. She came out on her own, nothing broken, some blood on her forehead from something. Both of us scraped and shaking. We stood next to the upside-down car in the middle of the storm and looked at each other. The front of the car looked bad. I walked around to see it. The hood was dented in a specific way, a straight depression across it. Not the crumple pattern from hitting a barrier or rolling, but the shape of an impact that came from directly in front at center. There was nothing else on the road. I walked forward maybe 40 feet, looking at the road surface, looking for whatever we'd hit. There was nothing. The dust thinned enough to see 30 feet in every direction. Just the road, the car behind me, Priscilla sitting on the asphalt next to it with her hands in her lap. Nothing else out there. A truck driver found us 20 minutes later. A semi running north, he said he'd seen the hazard flashers from the car, which made no sense because the car was upside down with the wheels in the air. But he pulled over and called 911 on his CB radio and stayed with us until the state troopers came. The ambulance came. Then another ambulance. Priscilla had a hairline fracture in her collarbone that she hadn't felt through the adrenaline. I had a mild concussion, 2 cracked ribs, a gash on my left forearm that needed 8 stitches. The hospital was in Ely, which meant we'd made it that far after all, 90-something miles from where I thought we were, though I have no memory of driving those miles. We were there 4 days. Priscilla's parents came. My mother flew in from Knoxville. State troopers came to take statements, polite men who wrote things down. And one of them, a sergeant named Howell, told us the accident report was going to be unusual because the collision damage on the car was inconsistent with simply running off the road. I asked him what he meant by inconsistent. He said the damage suggested the car had struck something. There was a clear impact pattern on the hood, on the front bumper, on the grille. He said the force of it was significant enough to cause the car to leave the road and roll. He said they'd searched the road surface and the surrounding area with the debris team and found nothing. No evidence of animal remains or another vehicle. He said it a few times, in different ways, as though repetition would make it make sense. The car had struck something, or something had struck the car, with enough force to roll us, and there was nothing on the road where it happened. Nothing that could account for what the damage said had occurred. Sergeant Howell sat across from me in the hospital room with his notepad, and I could see from the way he was holding his pen that he'd been a cop long enough to know when something wasn't going to have an answer. When you just write it down and close the file and don't think about it too much at night. I thought about telling him about the signs and about the gas station where the coffee was still warm, but instead I told him about the storm and the road and waking up in the car. He said there had been no storm there at the time, that perhaps the concussion had filled in the gaps, so I just left it at that. But again, whatever was standing in the middle of US 93 during that dust storm left a dent in the hood of a 2017 Honda Civic, and the concussion doesn't explain that.